It's time for another WrestlePlanet news update, as we have more on Daniel Bryan signing with AEW, Braun Strowman has teased multiple offers on the table, and plans for the AEW debuts of CM Punk and Daniel Bryan could be scrapped. All that and more coming up on today's video, but first... Tonight, AEW will host the Fight for the Fallen special edition of Dynamite, with 6 matches and 2 segments announced so far. So let's take a look at what they have in store for us in Charlotte, North Carolina, also known as Flair Country. Team Taz will host a championship celebration for the new FTW champion Ricky Starks. Julia Hart of the Varsity Blondes will go up against Thunder Rosa. New Japan's IWGP United States champion Lance Archer will defend against Bullet Club and New Japan star Hikuleo. Christian Cage teams with the Jurassic Express's Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus to take on Angelico and Private Party. The Inner Circle's Santana and Ortiz will take on the Pinnacle's FTR, which I personally can't wait for. The 5 Labors of Jericho will continue with Chapter 2, as Chris Jericho must get through Nick Gage in a no-rules match. The Elite will take on Hangman Page and the Dark Order, and if they win, Page will get a world title shot against Omega, and 2 members of the Dark Order will get a tag team title match against the Young Bucks. If they lose, they cannot challenge for either title. Tony Khan will have a big announcement on a future AEW event, which, as we've talked about a couple of times now, will likely be an event named The First Dance in Chicago's United Center, home of the Bulls and the Blackhawks. We expect this to be CM Punk's first dance in AEW. It'll be interesting to see if AEW decide to announce Punk this week or just the event itself. Either way, it's exciting times for AEW. But hopefully this doesn't all come crashing down, as we'll get to in our final story. Impact Wrestling have announced the Homecoming King and Queen tournament, which will air this Saturday, with the event being taped last week. We have a spoiler list of the participants, as some of these haven't been announced, but I won't spoil the results for you if you're planning on watching it. In the tournament, there will be 8 mixed gender teams, and they will go at it in a knockout style tournament similar to the King of the Ring. In terms of the teams taking part, Matt Cardona will team up with his fiancée Chelsea Green, Crazy Steve will team with Knockouts Tag Team Champion Rosemary, P.T. Williams will team with Jordan Grace, Tommy Dreamer teams up with Rachel Ellering, Brian Myers brings in Missy Hyatt to be on his side, Tasha Steeles and Falar Bar will be a team, Alicia Edwards teams with Hernandez, and finally the former Aiden English Drama King will team with the Knockouts champion Deonna Purrazzo. All of the tournament's matches will air all on the same night, with the show also featuring a hardcore match between Eddie Edwards and W. Morrissey. In a recent episode of her Oral Sessions podcast, Renee Paquette discussed her husband Jon Moxley and his brutal matches. Since his WWE departure in 2019, Moxley has appeared in several hardcore and deathmatch style bouts, which his wife claims is hard to watch. She said, "I was watching it with my mom. Yeah, it's difficult to watch. You don't want to see your loved one getting hurt like that. I mean, it's really scary. As much as he's a pro and a tough son of a bitch, it's hard to watch that. I'm always just waiting to talk to him after and make sure that everything is okay and for him to come home and all of that. Usually, I'll find a distraction. I'll be doing something as well during a match, because if I'm giving my 100% attention, it does stress me out." Moxley's most recent matchup came last week when he main evented Dynamite in a losing effort against Lance Archer, who took the IWGP United States Championship in the process. The bout was fought under Texas Deathmatch rules, and whilst this must have been difficult for Paquette to watch, I'm sure it was nothing compared to the exploding barbed wire deathmatch against Kenny Omega at AEW Revolution. Last week, NXT champion Karrion Kross took a loss on his WWE Raw debut, with Jeff Hardy pinning him in mere minutes. A rematch was scheduled for this week's episode of the show, but was cancelled after Jeff Hardy tested positive for COVID-19. Whilst many have speculated that this would have been Kross's chance to get his loss back by beating Hardy, Fightful Select are reporting that the plan was to actually have Kross lose once again. This of course would have made his record on Raw 0-2, this while whilst in the midst of a main event storyline on NXT with the returning Samoa Joe. After Hardy's positive test, Kross instead worked a match with Keith Lee, coming away with a submission victory. There's no word on what Kross would have done next after the original planned loss, but it's been reported that many within WWE were baffled by the idea of Kross losing on Raw in the first place, let alone twice in a row. You can bet that one of those people is Triple H, who has booked him extremely strong on the black and gold brand. On AEW Dark Elevation this past Monday, Lee Johnson earned a shot at Miro's AEW TNT Championship after defeating Lufa. Interestingly, the number one contenders match was booked by YouTuber Pulse, who earned the opportunity by winning the AEW Elite GM Invitational Tournament, with Elite GM of course being AEW's latest mobile game. The title match itself is set for next week on the homecoming edition of Dynamite, which sees the promotion return to Jacksonville, Florida's Daily's Place. Elsewhere on the card, Malachi Black will make his AEW in-ring debut, going up against his latest foe, Cody Rhodes. Cassidy Haynes of Bodyslam.net recently appeared on the Wrestling Inc. Daily podcast, where he discussed his recent report on Daniel Bryan signing with AEW. Haynes, who was the one to first break the news last week, discussed Bryan's deal, confirming that he has the ability to work in Japan, work less dates for comparable money to his WWE deal, as well as having creative input over his character and storylines. He was careful to say that this doesn't mean total creative control, just saying that Bryan has a say in everything he does, but everything still must run through AEW president Tony Khan. Haynes then revealed that the Daniel Bryan to AEW story is the biggest story he's ever broke in his career, and spoke of his confidence in his report and said, "People were asking me, how confident are you putting out this story? It's obviously the biggest story I've ever broke. It's one of those do or die with my career, you'd think, but if I've dropped the ball on this one, that's a big one to recover from. That's how confident I was putting it out there." A lot of people had been hearing it, but they weren't able to get anybody to acknowledge it or confirm it to them. I've never seen so many messages and phone calls in my life, but I visually got some confirmation back to the point where I was like, alright, I'm confident enough in everything I've heard to put this all out there. It was stressful because I was worried that somebody else was going to scoop me and beat me to it. Obviously, being a source for a report like this could backfire if it doesn't come to fruition, but Haynes has given his assurance that Bryan to AEW is in fact a done deal. And quickly, just before we continue, make sure you scroll down and drop a like and subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss any upcoming wrestling content as we head towards 20,000 subscribers. But now that you've done that, let's get on with the rest of the video. On July 2nd earlier this year, Braun Strowman and many of his colleagues were released from WWE. The former monster among men took to Twitter this week to tease his future, suggesting he has many options, whether that be in a wrestling ring or elsewhere. Strowman posted a meme with the caption, "Choices, choices, choices." In a recent report from the Wrestling Observer, they suggested that WWE are considering offering Strowman another deal to bring him back before his non-compete clause ends on August 31st. At which point he becomes a free agent. This is said to be in response to AEW's rumored signings of Bryan Danielson and CM Punk. As we discussed in a past video, bare knuckle fighting championships may have their name in the hat after teasing the signing of Strowman on social media, posting a photo of the star at their most recent show. AEW are also said to be interested, with talent scout Mark Henry pushing for his signing, and MLW have reportedly reached out too. In the coming months, AEW are set to travel across the United States after recently returning to a touring schedule after months of shows at Daily's Place in Jacksonville. They are booked for shows in Chicago, Pittsburgh, Houston, Milwaukee, Cincinnati, and Queens, New York, all within the next month or so, but there is said to be rising concerns within the company that the shows may not be able to take place in their intended locations. According to Cassidy Haynes of Bodyslam.net, AEW are extremely concerned about rising COVID cases across America, with a particular concern about their shows in Chicago and New York, which is the reported location of the debuts of CM Punk and Bryan Danielson respectively. The report states that the Chicago mayor has recently said the number of Chicago daily cases could necessitate the reinstatement of the city's mask mandate, as well as other potential restrictions. As for New York, the city will now require its municipal workers to get vaccinated or they face weekly COVID COVID tests. It could just be a matter of time before mass gatherings are once again forbidden, which could affect AEW's future events. Internally, AEW are said to be continuing ahead with their current plans, but are paying close attention to what the relevant local authorities do. In regards to CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, Punk is currently scheduled to debut on one of the Chicago shows on September 1st, 3rd, or 5th, and Bryan is expected to debut on the 22nd of September at AEW Grand Slam, which takes place in the Arthur Ashe Stadium and would be AEW's highest attendance to date. The biggest 2 months in AEW history seem to be on a knife edge, with talk of a return to Daily's Place said to be a possibility if it's needed. But stay tuned to the channel as we keep you updated on the situation.